We begin in Venezuela, where Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has expressed concern over recent violent incidents in Ecuador targeting Venezuelan people after the murder of a woman. Arreaza was speaking at a news conference a short while ago.
President Lenin Moreno is forced to recognize that nationality is not a criteria for criminalizing people, so it is especially heinous that the Ecuadorian government used that to avoid its responsibilities to stop violent crimes that they did not know how to handle, such as femicides.
Social activists and feminist groups in Ecuador are also criticizing the government after it announced Venezuelan migrants will have to present their criminal record to enter the country. The government's new measures came after a pregnant woman was killed by her partner, a Venezuelan citizen, in the northern city of Ibarra. Activists and feminist groups say authorities are promoting xenophobia with the announced requirements instead of fighting gender violence. This is the second crime reported against women in less than 1 week. The Ecuadorian Vice President Otto Sonnenholzner announced the measures on Monday morning. The government also announced the creation of special brigades to control the legal status of Venezuelan migrants.
Therefore, controls will be strengthened through a register that allows us to know with better precision the situation of those who are in the national territory and sanctions for those who take advantage of the difficult situation of migrants.
And the Venezuelan embassy in Ecuador has activated a special return to the homeland plan initiative for Venezuelans living in Ecuador who wish to return home. A notice from the embassy has invited Venezuelan citizens to reach out the consular locations in major cities and report any incidents of violence that threaten their lives or well-being. Our correspondent in Quito, Ecuador, Denise Herrera, has the details.
Ecuador is shocked with the latest cases of violence against women around the country. One of the cases is a 35-year-old woman who was found with blood, naked and sedated in a bathroom of a restaurant in Quito. The 3 men who did this were being accused for the rape and also were transferred to the La Tacunga prison. The other case was a 22-year-old woman who was 4 months pregnant, and she was stabbed to death and by her boyfriend, a Venezuela citizen. In light of these events, the president of Ecuador, President Lenin Moreno, announced new measures, and he confirmed that the government will create a special permit to Venezuelans to enter the country, and also the government will create units to control the Venezuelan immigration. Until now, the government didn't give any detail about how this will operate. Also, in a press conference today, the Vice President of Ecuador, Otto Sonnenholzner, reaffirmed Moreno's message and also added that the government will ask for criminal record for all Venezuelans to enter the country. Under these announcements made by the government, social organizations of women and also organizations of citizens of Venezuela that are living in Ecuador reject this message of xenophobic, and also they say and called for peace in Ecuador. The social organization of women also gathered yesterday in Quito, and today they are calling for a peaceful march to defend their rights. They are demanding to the authorities to take preventive and just measure for an Ecuador without any kind of violence.
Thank you, Denise, for that report. The Office of Venezuela Ministry of Defense has said it has foiled a conspiracy to steal weapons by a small group of National Guard personnel. The maneuver targeted weapons stores in the Petare neighborhood of Caracas. According to a statement, the assailants then headed to a military post in Coatiza in the west of Caracas, where they met resistance and surrendered. They are now providing information to intelligence. The authorities recovered the stolen weapons during the arrest. The irregular situation between the armed forces and the group occurred just before 3 a.m. local time. These are images from the Caracas neighborhood of San Jose de Cotiza, where the arrest took place. On Twitter, the president of the National Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, referred to the assailants as traitors who stole weapons in order to create violence and unease. The suspects say they were offered visas for carrying out the act. Some of residents have expressed their uncertainty over the unfolding situation.
The thing is, the opposition doesn't have a government plan to begin with, and that is why we are desperate. My opinion is that they should look for a peaceful solution that could include debate, dialogue. Let's look for a solution between all of us, because here things are bad for everyone. White, black, indigenous, whether you are yellow or blue, we are all having a difficult time.
Colombia's ELN guerrillas have assumed responsibility for Thursday's bomb attack in Bogota. A statement from the National Liberation Army said the police academy was a legitimate military target. It complained that the government had blocked peace talks and stepped up military operations against its units. 21 people were killed when the car bomb exploded. 68 others were wounded. Following the ELN claim, the Cuban government has condemned terrorism. On social media, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bruno Rodriguez, said that the government has never allowed its territory to be used for the perpetration of terrorist actions. Rodriguez also said that Cuba has complied with its role as mediator in negotiations between the Colombian government and the ELN. Thousands of Colombians protested on Sunday against violence and terrorism following the attack. President Iván Duque joined the demonstration along with several members of the government. The protest called March for Our Heroes took place all across Colombia. The demonstrators condemned the attack on the Santander Police Academy.
I am showing my children, my family, that we are mostly good, that these events cannot be repeated, neither in Colombia nor in any other part of the world. Only with education, with love, with family, with peace, this world can go forward. There are more of us good ones. Terrorists, no more, no more. You also have family, you have dreams, you have hopes. Among all of us, we can change if we work together for a better country.
Our correspondent in Venezuela, José Manuel Jiménez, has the latest.
A news conference is taking place right now inside of a Nariño castle, with a High Commissioner for Peace and also with a Colombian Foreign Minister. What they have said is that they are repeating their request to the Cuban government to arrest the different members of the ELN that are now in Cuba. Telesur asked the question, why after 7 long months this government never appeared at the peace talk table? Both recognized the commitments held with the ELN that had been made with the former government. So why, today during the news conference, have they said that they ignore all that was previously signed between the previous government and the guerrilla, and also now ignore the protocol signed? To this question, there was no clear and direct answer. The national government simply insists that Cuban government collaborate with Colombian government for the ELN members return to Colombian soil and into the custody of authorities. This is a complex and difficult moment for peace consolidation. Just as it was difficult with the FARC political party before, the ELN now faces a difficult situation. On a whole, Colombian society and the international community rejects the attack but also calls on the government to proceed with calm so that the possibility remains to work towards the building of a path towards peace. But current government has decided to cancel that pathway for the time being, and conditions continue to be placed on the ELN to renounce to any belligerent action and free all hostages. Duque's government says that only if that happens, there will be a possibility to retake dialogues. But some analysts ask whom this government will be able to dialogue with in Havana, if these members are imprisoned or extradited back to Colombia. To whom we'll talk to if the guerrilla does in fact meet the conditions.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Mexican authorities have said the number of people who lost their lives in the oil pipeline blast has risen to 85. An additional 58 people were hospitalized, according to the health minister. The explosion occurred when hundreds of people in Hidalgo State's Tlahuelilpan district rushed to collect fuel from a leak. Authorities have blamed oil thieves for drilling the pipeline which led to the blast. Funerals for the victims of the explosion have begun. Relatives called on the government to continue the search for the missing. Returning bodies has been slow because victims were burned beyond recognition. The government has promised to hold accountable those responsible for the incident.
We're not going to forget this horrible tragedy. We are here to support the relatives of the victims in all they need. We will support the hospitalized people. We will keep fighting to save them. And of course, we will continue with the investigation to solve the causes of the explosion. The Hidalgo state prosecutor will have to tell us who is responsible.
Our correspondent in Mexico, Pablo Perez, brings us more details.
The death toll from the pipeline explosion has risen to 89. The health secretary and the government say they are treating victims, including 3 minors who were transferred to care clinics that specialize in burns. 52 people remain in the hospital. Unfortunately, the death toll rose after some of the victims could not recover from their injuries. Many suffered severe burns because they were very close to the pipeline when the fire and explosion began.
In some other news from Mexico, at least 400 Honduran migrants are part of the latest caravan entering Mexican territory. 5 buses have arrived in Oaxaca City, but other migrants are still traveling on foot. The state's governor Alejandro Murat said they will provide them with food and shelter. Official sources say that on Sunday, another 500 arrived in San Pedro Tapanatepec City, also in Oaxaca State. They plan to wait there for other Hondurans before continuing their march to the U.S.
We are waiting here to get a permit to enter Mexico legally so that we can move about freely, and supposedly they told us that with this permit we will be allowed to find work.
It's an extra opportunity. We're not just here to risk our lives, but with the card, with this idea we can stay here in Mexico for a while and work a bit to save some money and keep pushing on to Tijuana.
At least 35 people have been killed in a series of bus accidents and this weekend in Bolivia. The first crash happened when 2 buses collide in the mountainous region of the Bolivian Altiplano, leaving 22 people dead and 37 injured. Another 13 people were killed when a bus crashed down an embankment. A third accident left several passengers injured by a fire after one of the rear tires exploded.
I was sleeping. I wasn't aware of anything. I only woke up when the bus was overturned. My foot and my hand were trapped. I don't know anything about my children. I was traveling with them.
Also in Bolivia, a new campaign to eradicate illegal coca leaf plantation has begun. The goal is to meet or exceed last year's results when more than 11,000 hectares were removed. More in this report.
Police and army forces started their eradication raids in the most active areas of the country, the Chapara area in Cochabamba and Yungas in La Paz. US-American policies have been criticized when it comes to the region's fight against drug trafficking.
There shouldn't be any countries that pretend to be superior than us and even to have the right to give orders to other nations, like how to carry on with an eradication process, rationalization, or how to fight against drug trafficking.
Fight against crime should never be influenced by politics or ideology. Never. The fight against crime is on behalf of all humanity.
In 2008, the US-American Anti-Narcotics Agency was banned from Bolivia for interfering in internal affairs. Since then, it's the responsibility of the state with the support of the European Union, who has approved Bolivia's success.
There's still bigger challenges ahead. However, I want to mention that some of last year's achievements made in Bolivia have been considered as an example for the whole region.
President Evo Morales has reiterated his criticism of the US government's policy.
I am still convinced that the so-called fight against drug trafficking, from the US point of view, is not focused on the eradication of drug trafficking, but for the geopolitical control of the world instead. And as we can prove it with results, facts, and statistics, we freed ourselves from their domination.
The chief of state has called his government strategy to reduce the illegal coca leaf production as a national effort to fight drugs.
Imagine us without military bases, without any U.S. financial aid. Now, thanks to our Bolivian police and military, we have a model of a struggle against drug trafficking, which has yielded more results than the empire's policies and the North American doctrine of war against drugs. It has been a total failure.
The eradication of illegal coca plantations has also been conducted by collaborating with local farmers. Each family has the chance to grow 40 square meters of coca plants. 83% of last year's crops were legal. That means they were only meant for traditional reasons.
People in Panama City are enjoying a Bible-based theme park to learn about the stories related to Virgin Mary and Jesus. People can see a three-dimensional Mary and learn about the miracles in the Bible. More than 200,000 people are expected to visit the park in the coming days. On Sunday, a massive power outage hit various parts of the country. A group of Nicaraguans are traveling to Panama to see Pope Francis at the World Youth Day. The Catholic Church in the country has said around 2,000 worshippers will travel to Panama City. Many of them have sold their personal belongings to afford the trip and see the Pope. Guyana's High Court is preparing to hear arguments on the validity of the non-confidence motion that resulted in the government's downfall. The government has filed arguments in the matter. They're arguing that there was a miscalculation of the majority of the all MPs needed to defeat the vote. This while the opposition's newly elected presidential candidate, Irfan Ali, is calling for elections to be held in March. A court ruling is expected by the end of this month. In St. Kitts and Nevis, the opposition is renewing its call for the government to release the latest IMF country report. The main opposition Labour Party said the government failure to do so falls in the face of the democratic tenets of transparency, accountability, and good governance. Last week, the Prime Minister said his administration was using the option available to it on whether or not to publish the economic data.
The Central Bank and the IMF.
The Democratic Republic of Congo is facing other challenges, such as the empowerment of art and artists. This fight represents the citizens' struggle for a better life.
Artist Jonas Bwanga is painting the former Belgian ambassador in his workshop called Calcium in the neighbourhood of Kinshasa. All the visa requests he has made up until now have been denied. In addition, his art workshop needs support. He also painted the former US ambassador.
The unfinished, the cuts, the fragmentation, the realism. The Calcium style is like many modes of style that I have learned to bring through and give strength to in my art. It's a little bit of that. The painting takes the appearance of a painting from the 20th century. There are no hits, but you see the face, the print, the emotions. The search for my work led me to take my own ideas further and carry out things that no other person could do, not copying, things made by myself. So that's what I call the Calcium style.
His artworks are inspired by the country's social issues. Children need to grow in a family to understand the sense of life. It's not normal that in Kinshasa there are children on the streets.
In this country, people underestimate art. They do not value it in the present moment. You find people that underestimate paintings and that do not know the value or the importance of works of art.
Calcium is also a school.
I had many difficult times in school, with fees and the lack of resources. That's why I decided to drop out of school to come here to my teacher's house so that he could teach me.
It's our passion, it's our destiny, it's our future.
Merlin has also painted his self-portrait.
There is no support. Our country isn't functioning. That means that people do not understand art. Our country has been betrayed from the president governing us through to what we're seeing here. Our art does not have value.
The barriers of the Congolese artists?
It's very important for an artist to travel, to see how art evolves, to cultivate intelligence and knowledge. and to improve their talents. But here, limitations are seen in the conditions in which we work. We work in a cave here, and it's not normal that an artist works in these conditions.
The political reality is in the crosshair, that of a government that does not invest in them, and that of a structure of international power that does not let them travel, sealing them in an iron cage.
We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. She's the daughter of immigrants from Jamaica and India. Now Democratic Senator Kamala Harris says she will run for the United States presidency in 2020. She launched her campaign for the White House on Monday. However, Harris must first become the Democratic presidential nominee before being able to face Trump in the election. She has the advantage of looking most like Democrats' increasingly diverse base of young, female, and minority voters.
Less than 15 hours ago.
The richest 26 people in the world own as much as poorest 50%. That's according to a new report released by Oxfam International as leaders gather for the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The report says billionaires saw their fortunes increase by 12% last year, or around $2.5 billion a day. Meanwhile, the poorest half, about 3.5 billion people, saw their wealth fall by 11%. Oxfam is calling on governments to raise taxes on corporations and the wealthy. 3 people in Russia have been detained on suspicion of founding the Islamic State in Syria. Here's more on that and a look at some other stories from around the world.
The Russian Federal Security Service, FSB, has detained 3 people in southern Russia on suspicion of financing the Islamic State. According to the FSB report, the suspects collected money under the guise of charity donations that were transferred to militants in Syria. During their fundraising mission, officials say the suspects handled an estimated 10 million rubles. All 3 have reportedly confessed to the crime during interrogation. Police in Pakistan are facing public backlash after they killed 4 people in a car. According to counterterrorism officers, they targeted the car believing it belonged to a local Islamic State leader. But inside the vehicle were grocery store owner Muhammad Khalil, his wife, and 12-year-old daughter. And the police account has been disputed by eyewitnesses, including Khalil's 3 young children who were dropped off at a petrol station by the police. They sustained minor injuries. Protests broke out over the weekend in response. The incident is now being investigated by the Joint Investigations Team.
We're coming, and they killed my mother and father.
Rest assured that, God willing, we will ensure that you get justice. Do not worry. These children are like my own children.
And footage has emerged showing the Syrian air defense repelling a series of Israeli airstrikes around Damascus. The Israeli Defense Force has claimed that their strikes were aimed at the Quds force of Iran's Revolutionary Guards. The Syrian Arab Army says it has intercepted most of the Israeli missiles fired over the last 48 hours.
Taxi drivers in Spain's capital, Madrid, began an open-ended strike today, demanding regulations on ride-hailing companies like Uber. The drivers are demanding a ratio of 1 ride-hailing vehicle for every 30 taxis. The Madrid regional government is holding meetings with representatives of taxi associations in an attempt to end the strike. Russians are marking the 95th anniversary of Vladimir Lenin's death. They gather in Moscow's Red Square and laid flowers at his mausoleum, honoring the man who led the Russian Revolution. The United Nations Migration Agency is using theater to raise awareness about migration in Tunisia. The play titled Le Rideau will give the Tunisian public the opportunity to reflect on the issue through art. The work is about the stormy journey of 8 migrants whose sole objective is to reach Italy to start a new life. And with this, we come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find on our website at telsurenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.